Welcome to all of you guys. And this is my second video for Form 3. And this second video for Form 3 is about migratory and settlement patterns and indigenous peoples in the Caribbean. And our special goal from the syllabus that what you will be tested about, that the exams will be about, is to describe the migratory and settlement patterns of indigenous people in the Caribbean up to the arrival, as it says above, to the Spanish in 1492. And this video is especially about the first migrants to the Caribbean. It will be somewhat shorter than my last video, and it will be especially about this theme above. Yeah. If you want to look it up in a book, it's about chapter 1. Yes, like this. Chapter 1. Oops. Chapter 1 of Caribbean History for CSEC. Chapter 1. There were different groups coming to the different islands of the Caribbean, as you see above. It was not one group, there were different groups. And this time I'm not talking about waves, because a wave is like coming in at once. But these groups were continuously migrating for often a few thousand years. So it's better to speak of a group this time. The first group came from the Guianas that are over here. Yeah. So this group migrated from the Guianas over there and somewhat more to the east, the Guianas. We know this from archaeological findings, research of the still existing language, that's not a lot, and things like that. We know the first group, some 7,000 years ago, came from this area of the Caribbean. The second group was from Belize. And if I am correct, Belize is over here. So the first group came from over here and more to the east. And the second group came from over here, what now is the country of Belize. That's the second group. Then it's important, like I just said, that we take note of the fact that there was continuous migration. So it was not just one wave coming in. Yeah, for a period of 5,000 years or sometimes 3,500 years, these groups migrated to the different islands in the Caribbean. So not a wave, but a continuous migration. I will come back to this word later on in the timeline. There are also third groups and groups after that. Yeah, but these third groups are the main ones. And in my next timeline, I'm going to explicit what I've just told. But keep in mind, the Guianas, that is British Guiana, Suriname nowadays, and French Guiana, and Belize, a small country nowadays close to Mexico. Some 7,000 years ago, there were two parts of which the Caribbean was inhabited. So the first inhabitants, the indigenous people, the native people of the Caribbean, first came from these two areas. A timeline. If you followed my class and if you've paid attention, you know I like timelines. Who doesn't like a timeline, actually? Everybody should. And if I just erase this, yes, this timeline, I hope it will clear some things out that perhaps are pretty complicated. Yeah? So a timeline works like this. Yes. The first part is the oldest part, that's this part. And the other part is the last in history. So this is close to our age. And this part is very long ago. In our example, it is 7,000 years ago. So this part is 7,000 years ago, while this part is more to our time. Over there. Yeah? Okay, we begin 7,000 years ago. 7,000 years ago, and I need to have my mouse back. 7,000 years ago. Yeah, we have the first group coming from the Guianas. Yeah, some 7,000 years ago, give or take. Archaeologists often don't mind a year or 100 years earlier or later, but it is about 7,000 years ago. And somewhat later, but around the same time, there were also people coming from Belize, the country I just showed you on the map. Yeah. And important here, that is continuous migration. So not one wave, but they keep on coming. It's like showering and water comes out, and it's not just one burst of water. No, smaller drips of water coming out of the shower, things like that. Okay, next group comes from the continent some 2,500 years ago. And the last group are multiple groups, four probably, who came the last 1,500 years of our time counting, like the 1,500 after Christ. Yeah. So this is like a timeline, the first migrants in the Caribbean that we know of, and these are the patterns. So not all the details, because as you will see in my next sheet, in my next slide, you can go a lot of detail, more detail on this, but for you guys, that's not that important actually. Yeah? Okay. Important is that the Guyanas and Belize had a continuous migration from 7,000 years coming. So 5,000 before Christ, this started, and for like 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, this kept on going. So not one wave. 1 century, 2,500 years ago, there was a group coming in from the continent. We don't know why. You could think of reasons, but this is like speculating. But this is what archaeologists sometimes do. You have to begin somewhere. And four groups came 2,000 years ago, actually, the last 1,500 years ago, before the Spanish. Yeah? So, like the 1,500 years before the Spanish came, then these last four groups came to the Caribbean. Then also is important, the last four groups, the Spaniards met these groups. So the Spaniards, Columbus, and those who came after him met people who were the descendants of the four groups who came to the Caribbean some 1,500 years before. Those other groups, they came into contact later, or those groups mixed with the other groups. But we know that the last four groups who came to the Caribbean, those were the ones the Spanish had the most contact with. They encountered the most from the beginning in 1492 with the arrival of Columbus in the Caribbean. Then something about how does archaeology work. I'm going to go back here, better place for me. Okay, the work of archaeologists. Yeah, and here it's also important that you know what the patterns are, but it's less important that you know each detail, but you have to be able to describe the big patterns of the migration and the settlement of the indigenous people in the Caribbean, like the goal above. The work of archaeologists. In the former video, I've told you guys already that archaeologists study all kinds of stuff, from bones until the rocks they use, or an arrow point they use, but also pottery and buildings. And in this way, they can estimate the grouping into ages. They can make an estimate of how old it is. And also, they can deduce certain stuff. For instance, you find an arrow point, you know that they hunted. That is deducing, like a detective does. And fourth, and this is new, we can also, by findings and by finding buildings, by finding arrow points, by finding pieces of pottery, we also can divide them, the people, the inhabitants of the Caribbean, into certain types. Because if the pottery looks alike, that's a certain type. If they use the same arrow points and also use the same pottery, we know it's the same type of people. And this is what they did. Yeah, the work of archaeologists dividing them into types. For instance, Orthoroid, Casimeroid, and Stelloid. Pretty difficult names, pretty technical names even, because people did not call themselves like this. There were no people who called themselves Ortoroid. There never existed any people who called themselves Casimiroid. Instead of that, they are modern labels. I mean by that, these labels are from the last 100 years. Someone else gave them this name. And why these complicated names? They were named after the settlements where the archaeologists first discovered their culture, their type, you could say better actually. So by saying this pottery looks alike and their arrow points look alike and they have the same diet, they eat the same stuff, we have a type of inhabitants of the Caribbean. Yeah, we don't know how they named themselves, but archaeologists say we have discovered a type. And this type was named after, for instance, a river or an area. For instance, in Puerto Rico, I think you have a river, and the Ortoroid or the Saladoid was named after them. So they were named after the river or an area where their settlement was found. But of course, these names are often modern, not always, by the way. But this has nothing to do with if they saw themselves as a separate people, if they what name they gave themselves. This is a modern label and some name an archaeologist gave them. I don't need you to know all of the 8 types. Look into them in the textbook of the Caribbean history and understand how they got their names and how archaeology works in these. Yeah? Okay. That is my final word of this video. We talked about the end goal, who says above, describe up to the arrival of the Spanish in 1492. And we talked about the first migrants to the Caribbean. And the textbook is Chapter 1, Caribbean History for CSEC. I wish you all a nice day. If you have questions, you can ask them during class or in classroom or above. Not above, below the video. Yeah. And I wish all of you guys a nice day. Drink enough because it is very hot.